I'm here today to ask for your support for the Washington State Agriculture History Project, which will inform Washingtonians and future generations about the important role that agriculture has played in our state. Like I said, I am the Assistant Director at HistoryLink. I'm also an environmental historian, and I am thrilled that my career has led me to HistoryLink. I've been there for about 9 years now. We are the online encyclopedia of Washington state history. We have more than 7,600 articles on the state of Washington, and quite a number of those are on the ports. I wrote actually 12 of the port histories that we have on the site. This year is our 20th anniversary of publishing the online encyclopedia, and it is just one of the projects that we do because our mission is to pioneer innovative approaches to historical research, education, and publishing. Our primary public service activity is the production of HistoryLink.org, and we average about 4,000 visitors to our site every day. We estimate that about a third of those users are educators and students. We've worked extensively with both the ports of Seattle and Tacoma and the Washington Public Ports Association around the centennial of the Port District Act. We have the history of all 75 port districts on HistoryLink, and like I said, I did 12 of those. I had a great time doing that. And we were also commissioned by the Port of Seattle and the Ports Association to write their histories on the occasion of the centennials. I have a one-page brochure here. If after we're done you'd like more information about HistoryLink, I'd be happy to share that with you. Our partners in the Agriculture Project are Jennifer Kilmer, who is the director of the Washington State Historical Society. They are taking the lead on the educational portion of the project, and Kara Rowe, the CEO of North by Northwest, a full-service digital studio that will be providing audio and video for the site, for the project. One of the things that we found is that multimedia approach is a really important one for drawing in educators and students to the site and pull them in and make them want to explore further. The Washington State Historical Society offers a variety of services to researchers, historians, scholars, and lifelong learners, as well as operating the State History Research Center and Washington State History Museum here in Tacoma. And North by Northwest is located in Spokane and works with Washington farmers and ranchers to produce the Emmy-winning television series Washington Grown, which is now in its
8th season. We just got greenlit for another season this year.
So Kara and I met for the first time over 2 years ago. We've known for some time that we needed more agricultural history on the site because that's such an important part of Washington's heritage. And Kara, of course, would like to help have more people hear that story and know that story. And so Marie and Kara worked out this idea for a comprehensive agricultural history project that would include content on the site that anyone can access for free at any time, but also that could be used by educators across the state. And so out of that initial meeting, the Washington State Agriculture History Project was created.
So I get asked a lot, Kara, why do you care so much? Well, first of all, I'm a farm girl from Eastern Washington. I was actually raised on a wheat and cattle ranch out in Big Bend country. So where's my Port of Ephrata folks?
Hey.
Good to see you. So I was raised outside of the town of Wilbur. How many of you have heard of Wilbur before? All right.
Right.
Very good. The Billy Burger is still alive and well, open for business. Yes, Doxy's is still open as well. Yes, the golf course is still there, still 9 holes and still absolutely wonderful. I'm waiting for Port of Wilbur to join your ranks, but I don't know that that will ever happen. So I'm also a former policy and outreach director for the Washington Association of Wheat Growers. I spent about 5 years doing outreach and policy work for them. Prior to that, I was marketing director for the wheat and barley farmers of Montana. So ag runs very deep. I still have 2 brothers running the farm. My folks still live on the farm outside of Creston and Wilbur there. So right now, as in my position with North by Northwest, I travel the state and I still do a lot of ag work. In fact, right now, I'm working on keeping our Columbia Snake and Willamette rivers working. I work with the ports along the river there to tell their story, not only from an ag perspective, but just from an all commodity perspective. As Jennifer mentioned, I also produced the TV show Washington Grown, which tells the story of Washington farmers in as quote-unquote sexy of a way as we can. We realized a long time ago people don't necessarily care about farms, but they certainly care about their food. And so putting food at the center of that project is what has made it continue to help us tell the story of our farms and our farmers in that way, with keeping food at the center of the plate. In my travels facing and interacting with so many of the public, I've seen firsthand how far removed not only future generations, but my generation. I'm a Gen Xer. How many other Gen Xers are out there? All right, hang in there. So many of us are removed from the farms. It used to be everybody had a grandfather or a grandmother from the farm. Now we're 4 and 5 generations removed. Kids don't know where their food comes from, and they certainly don't know how incredible the agricultural landscape is in Washington State. We grow 300 different crops here. We're second only to California in the diversity of the crops that we grow. You guys know that better than anybody because you're helping transport it from point A to point B. So right now, we see any opportunity that we can create to inform and educate people about not only the farm's impact on their food, but also on the economy and in the trade world as well. And so we are working on that to not only inform our generations, but Generation Z that's coming up. And if you've read anything, I encourage you all, read as much as you can about Generation Z coming up in the ranks. It's a whole different world when it comes to these kiddos who are currently in our public school system. So that's why I reached out to Marie. I said, we gotta help educate these kids. Our farm heritage is strong, but it's just unknown and becoming more and more lost in the shuffle. So we need the public to know and understand not only what you do, but what our farmers do. And what I was hoping to do is show you, we did a little kind of a rough draft of what some of these histories might look like. So we brought with us history of wheat in Washington. We condensed it down so that you're going to get about 3 minutes of a much larger piece, but we thought we would share that with you today. So give us a minute and we'll see if we can make it work.
This was a place where fur traders came and put down roots. Some of the places seemed very unlikely places to grow crops. Pretty harsh conditions.
Wheat has been growing in Washington since the 1820s. It was brought here by early pioneers, and people milled it into flour for bread. It was first grown in Hudson's Bay Company outposts and forts.
The Hudson's Bay Company wanted to see those posts become as self-sufficient as possible. So there were efforts made to grow crops around fur trading facilities, Fort Vancouver being a key one of those.
The settlements often exported excess wheat to Europe from ports along the Washington coast. In the 1860s, more people settled in the Northwest, and they discovered that the Walla Walla area was good for growing wheat.
So then the market for wheat involved putting together 200-pound bags of grain and or bags of flour. It took a lot of ingenuity to try to find a way to get this bounty we produced off to a market. First, people tried transporting by wagon. That was a difficult way. Then tramways were built.
Crews working on the tramway loaded sacks on wagons at the top of the Snake River Coulee. Those wagons then traveled down the tramway rails to warehouses and docks on the river.
And getting steamboats up the river was an interesting endeavor, too. Those steamboat operators were fearless coming up the river. It was a dangerous proposition. They made it through. And then we learned about hauling grain on the rail system. The transcontinental railroads in 1882 and 1883 changed all of that.
In the 1950s, farmers replaced horse teams with motorized equipment like tractors and single-tire trucks. Farmers could get more field work done in less time with the new equipment. New motorized combines made the harvesting process less labor-intensive. In the 1950s, farmers began exporting wheat to Asia and the Middle East for Asian noodles and flatbreads. Whitman and Lincoln counties continue to be the top 2 wheat-growing counties in Washington and in the entire U.S.
This is a remarkable land. It's the finest wheat-producing area in the United States, if not in the world.
This project is funded out of the, partially out of the Office of the Superintendent in Public Instruction and other state agencies, and we're working hand in hand to develop the materials to make sure that they comply to the standards for 7th graders. We want to make sure that these are tools that are useful to teachers. We know how full the curriculum is these days and what the expectations are, and so this will be one piece of the curriculum. So what I love about that clip is that it captures the same thing that we learned when we were doing the Port History Project, is that people have a general vague sense that trade and farming are important to Washington State, but these stories will bring out the detail, and people will understand better how that infrastructure, it takes a series of decisions and a lot of work on people's parts and a lot of planning in order to ensure that we have the infrastructure we need in order to have the economy that we have. And so my favorite part of being a historian is saying, I know you think you know that story, but you don't actually know that story. It's a really interesting, multifaceted story, and that will be what we'll be able to share with these students and with the public reading these articles and watching these videos. And so our total budget for this project is $300,000, and we are securing $150,000 in state funding, including from the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction and the State Department of Agriculture. We need to match that with $150,000 raised from other sources. We currently have raised $70,000 from the Peach Foundation, Washington Grain Commission, Washington Dairy Commission, the Washington State Farm Bureau, and the ports of Pasco and Whitman County. That also includes $20,000 from the Port of Seattle, which has just been confirmed. We've also secured funding from the private agricultural interests, including the grain and apple industries. Because of the deep mutual interdependence of trade and agriculture, we're asking you all to consider a contribution from your ports to this project. Sorry, lost my place there. Our endorsements come from legislators across the state, such as Representative Bruce Chandler in the 15th District, Representative Mike Chapman in the 24th, Senator Judy Warnick in the 13th, Representative Joel Kretz in the 7th, and Representative Gerald Tarleton in the 36th. As Marie met with each of them individually about this project, she was struck by how generous and supportive they were of this project. And another really great thing about this project is it does bring the whole state together. It helps people understand how interconnected the eastern and western parts of Washington are in their economies, and gives a much better holistic view of how the state works together to be the great place that it is. The history of agriculture is the history of our state, and the ports of Seattle and Tacoma play an important role in this story, but so do every port in the state. And so we're hoping that all of you will consider supporting us. If you can do $20,000, that would be spectacular. If you could do $1,000, that would be amazing. All of this will make a difference in our effort to build the content on HistoryLink and develop the videos and enrich the curriculum. And so if you have any questions, we will be at the reception afterwards, and I have materials that I'm happy to share with you that have more detail. But thank you again for your time. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk.